Washington Pod presents EARL Nightingale.
When I was an announcer-writer at radio station KTAR in Phoenix, Arizona, shortly after the end of World War II, my goal was to become a network announcer in Chicago or New York, the national headquarters of radio at that time. I listened to the network announcers and practiced reading commercials as they did, so that the copy sounded spontaneous and ad-libbed. I studied the delivery of every first-class network announcer in the country, and soon I could sound very much like them. Every commercial I read on the air at KTAR, whether for the local mortuary or sporting goods store, I read as though it was a Jell-O commercial on the Jack Benny Show. I gave so much pizzazz to the local commercials, my announcer friends soon dubbed me Network and kidded me, found my efforts ludicrous. They were helping me on my way. "Why do you knock yourself out on those ridiculous commercials?" they'd ask. And I would smile and go about my business. As a copywriter, it was my good fortune to work with Paul Hughes, a novelist, and John McGreevy, who at that time was already writing radio plays for several of the New York and Hollywood dramatic radio shows. John was a Phi Beta Kappa who had majored in English at the University of Indiana. I plagued them both with questions and read every book they recommended in order to improve my writing skills. As for improving my announcing abilities, I was going to the best school in the country. I was listening every day to those men who were at the very top of their field, and no matter how mundane the copy or humble the place of business, when I stepped up to the microphone, I had a picture of the entire country listening to every word I spoke. I gave it my very best. And after 2.5 years at KTAR in Phoenix, I felt I was ready for the big time. I told my friends I'd soon quit and head for Chicago. My announcement was met with unbelieving stares and the most vociferous arguments. "There are 450 Union card-carrying announcers walking the streets of Chicago trying to get work at the big stations there," I was told. I wondered how they knew about the 450 people, and had to admit I'd never belonged to the American Federation of Radio Artists, later to become the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists. But my mind was made up, and in March of 1949 I bought a one-way airplane ticket to Chicago. I told my wife I'd send for her and the kids after I got settled. In Chicago, I took a room at the old Chicagoan Hotel in the Loop, bought a copy of the Chicago Tribune, and turned on my portable radio. It turned out there were 2 target radio stations. They were the 2 biggest and the best at the time, WBBM, CBS in the Wrigley Building on Michigan Avenue, and WMAQ, NBC in the Merchandise Mart. I tackled WBBM first. I'll never forget that first day in those beautiful, posh surroundings, the marble floors, the uniformed elevator starters, those fabulous brass and glistening hardwood elevators, the CBS pages busily running about. Al Morey was program director at the time, and I presented myself in my brand-new Hickey Freeman gray flannel double-breasted suit. He was most cordial and immediately led me to a large nearby studio for an audition. He gave me a fistful of copy that included some tricky commercials and part of a newscast. The studio was as impressive as the rest of the place, very large for one thing, with a concert grand piano and sound effects paraphernalia. Here was where network shows originated. I walked to the standing microphone and looked into the darkened engineer's room beyond the slanting glass. There was an old-time engineer, and Al Morey nodded his head and threw me a hand cue, and I began. Well, he told me he'd let me know, and the next day I repeated the process at WMAQ and was told I'd be called and told how I did. Later that afternoon, WMAQ called and said they had a job for me. I almost passed out with joy, but I thanked the man cordially, told him I'd be in to see him the following day. Then I waited. Finally, Al Morey called. I had the job at CBS, whereupon I made an appointment for the next morning. I was giddy with the sudden inflation of my self-esteem. 2 auditions, 2 job offers. Where were all those 450 unemployed union card-carrying announcers? The next morning I had something of a plan. I had an early breakfast, showed up at the palatial Wrigley Building at 9 sharp. I thanked Al Morey for his most generous offer, but I told him I'd also been offered a job at WMAQ, his NBC rival. I mentioned that KTAR, where I'd worked for 2.5 years, had been an NBC affiliate, and I was familiar with that network and liked it. I confessed that I just didn't know what to do. Whereupon Al told me that he was prepared to offer me a year's contract with an option on the second at a weekly wage considerably higher than union scale if I'd come with CBS. Well, that did it. I not only had a job, I was under contract and more money than I had dreamed of earning. My 2.5 years of doing network commercials for a local radio station had paid off. I was now a CBS network announcer on a 50,000-watt clear-channel radio station whose coverage map blanketed most of the Midwestern United States, to say nothing of the country's second-largest metropolitan market. Indeed, I had arrived. I was a passable writer, and I could hold my own with any announcer in the country. I was off and running. My preparation had paid off. Later, I took a 2-year course in creative writing from Professor W.S. Campbell, the first Rhodes Scholar from Oklahoma at the University of Oklahoma. It was my understanding that Dr. Campbell's class at OU turned out more successful, money-making writers than any other writing course in the country. It certainly worked for me. I took it by mail. Well, I've obtained 10 times the education since leaving school that I ever obtained while a student. I can go at my own pace, choose my own subjects, and you can do the same. If your goal involves a degree or degrees in subjects that cannot be learned at home, but demand residency at a college or university, you can do that too, if your goal is sufficiently important to you. It's difficult to learn brain surgery at home or advanced biology or chemistry. For many subjects, only attendance for the required time will do, but the years will pass anyway, whether you prepare for your compelling goal or not, so why not go to work on it? Our education should end only when we do, and the process of education can be endlessly fascinating. We're never without something interesting to do, new books to order and read, new projects to undertake. We can become teachers if we like, and pass our enthusiasm and skills on to others similarly inclined. So whether you're a river person or a goal person, keep studying your specialty. Go to meetings and conventions on the subject if you feel they'll help. Soak up all you can. Participate in any way that you can. Become involved, but leave plenty of time to work toward your goal. Don't become so bogged down in various service activities that you don't have time, the important core time, to devote to your journey.